Hey guys, I'm coL.qxc's. Today we're going to be talking about Legacy of the Void. For those of you who live under a rock or don't have the internet, Legacy of the Void was announced very recently at BlizzCon along with a whole slew of changes. I'm going to be sorry. I'm going to be basically running through them, giving you a brief overview of what there is to offer in case you didn't read through it yourself or forgot. And then I'm going to be giving you the pro gamer insight into what some of these changes mean for the future of StarCraft. So, with that being said, I'm going to start off with the... I'm not going to talk about campaign at all. This is purely a multiplayer look. So we're going to start off with the kind of out-of-game functionality that they're adding. Biggest ones that they've announced, Archon mode. This is basically micro-macro, if you know what that is. Two players spawn the game on a single base, but they both control the same set of units. So you're basically playing a 1v1, but you've got two people to manage your resources, two people to spread out the micro. And I think it's a really good approach to StarCraft multiplayer. A lot of people complain that 2v2, 3v3, 4v4, they're not really fun multiplayer modes. And in a lot of ways, they don't seem exactly right for StarCraft. And I think of team modes in StarCraft kind of the same way that I think of modes like 1v1 in League of Legends or Dota or Heroes. You know, you can play it, but the game isn't really designed to be played with that number of people. But the Archon mode is a really, really interesting approach, especially if they put a full ladder behind it. I don't know exactly what the how it's going to be implemented, but having it as an official Blizzard mode, you know, you and a friend are probably not going to be at the same skill level. One of you is going to be a bit better than the other, and then you can support each other. You know, you can have your friend take care of some of the more specific things, and you can have the better player guide the team, you know, dictating the build order, determining the strategy, making calls about, you know, okay, Oracle's out, you micro the Oracle, I'm going to keep macroing, things like that. So I really like this approach. One of the biggest problems with StarCraft is that it's very inaccessible. It's very hard for new players to get into. It's a very demanding and stressful environment. Laddering feels like a very individual experience. So adding a mode like Archon mode means that all of a sudden, you know, it's not 3 people playing together, it's not 4 people playing together, but it is 2. It's you and one other person, and that's a really good start. I'm very excited to see what happens with that. Another mode that's being added is called Commander mode, and we didn't get a ton of information about that, but basically it looks like some kind of cooperative game mode with some special functionality thrown in. There's really not a lot of details here, but I really do like Blizzard taking the approach of, well, StarCraft 1v1 without huge amounts of overhauls is going to be an inaccessible, difficult to learn experience. It's just not going to be appealing to the large amount of casual gamers. But the initiative to create more cooperative and more team-based modes is a great way for new players or players who kind of got turned off by the way StarCraft is done back into the game with Legacy of the Void. So I really like that. Pretty excited to see what other announcement they have regarding that. The final out-of-game thing, and this isn't a game mode, but a feature that I think a lot of players have been wanting for a long time is automated daily tournaments. And depending on what the reward is for these, they could be, you know, they could be a bit of a dud if people don't really care about them, they don't take them seriously, they don't really want to play with them. But it wouldn't be hard for Blizzard to put just a little bit of incentive behind it, even if it's just WCS points, special portraits. You know, you could have a portrait that's only unlocked if you win 10 tournaments, something like that. Or if you get a certain placing, you know, top 8 in one of these automated tournaments gets you a portrait. Stuff like that. Getting people to actually play in them, I think it's a really good initiative. And it should be a great way to kind of build up some of that lower grassroots that StarCraft really needs. Okay, so that's basically out-of-game, multiplayer kind of stuff. Before I go into the specific races, the biggest change that needs to be talked about, well, the two biggest changes. One is all games you will now start with 12 workers. And I'm not exactly sure how that works with Terran, because the command center doesn't provide 12 supply. I know the Nexus provides more supply now. I could have looked at the show matches to figure out exactly what that would be, but either way, it doesn't really matter. Point is, games will now start approximately 1.5 to 2 minutes in to where they were now. So, like, in a current game of StarCraft, you will have approximately 12 workers around the 1.5 minute, 2 minute mark. Games will now start at that point. I think this is another really great change. One of the biggest problems that new players have is they don't build enough workers, and they don't really understand the importance of workers. So putting the beginning of the game in a position that's a little more economical, you can kind of do things with 12 workers. With 6 workers, there's really no decision making. You either like 6 pool or proxy 2 gate, or you build workers for 2-3 minutes, and you add barracks and things like that. With 12 workers, you could conceivably, start military production right away and not be in this horrible crippling position. Of course, without actually having played it, it's hard to say for sure, but it's a really good change to help alleviate some of that pressure that newer players feel when they get into the game. They really have no idea what to do. They have a bit more economy, a bit more of a footing behind them to get that game going. There is the potential for some builds to be lost. Proxy gates, 6 pools, 2 racks. Some of these builds may kind of go away. And the reason for that is like, well, imagine you're proxy gating. Right now, you would send one of your starting 6 workers, and when it gets to their base, you build a pylon, you build a gateway. If you start with 12 workers and you send one of your first 12, you're not really, it doesn't really work out. Like, you have to start the pylon almost immediately in your base. You wouldn't be able to get to their base in time. So a lot of these early gate timings are going to be different, but I don't think it's fair to say right now that this is literally a transpose 1.5 to 2 minutes into the game, because each race has slightly different amount of, like, hits 12 workers at slightly different times, depending on chrono boost, making drones, and also each race will have a slightly different amount of minerals in the bank when they have 12 workers. And so this is not an exact transposition just moving the game forward. It's actually going to be a different start altogether. And so it will take some time before people really figure out, what can you do from this? What makes sense? Is it that your economy is so strong all of a sudden that you can just open very heavy macro because the early all-ins don't really hit fast enough, or one base play is stronger? Only time will tell, and it'll take a decent amount of games to figure that out exactly. Other big change is that minerals will now have 1,000 minerals per patch instead of 1,500. Gas geysers are reduced to, I want to say, 1,700 gas instead of 2,500 gas. Same number of gas geysers, same number of mineral patches. Basically what this means is every base is going to be mining out way faster, which should hopefully increase incentive for expanding and reduce the ability of players to turtle, is basically it. If your one base build runs out of resources that much quicker, then you can't one base for as long. One basing won't be as strong, potentially. Same with 2 basing, 3 basing, 4 basing. And this is all, I really like this change. On paper, I haven't played any of these changes because they're just not available. There haven't been opportunities. I wasn't actually at BlizzCon. But I really like the idea behind it, and that is that conflict is the heart and soul of StarCraft. Nobody's watching this game because they want to watch someone macro for 15 or 20 minutes. You can be impressed by a player's macro. You can be in awe of their ability. It's always, especially as somebody who's tried to do something, you watch Flash or Parting, and you're like, wow, he has so much supply at this point. But the thing that really catches people, the thing that people are really watching for, is the fights. They want to see players make an army and fight each other. They don't want to see players just sit back and make units forever and ever and ever, and nothing happens, right? Because it's all about the conflict. And so by decreasing the amount of resources per base, you force players to be more aggressive on the map because you are almost always expanding towards your opponent. The closer you get to your opponent, the more likely there's going to be conflict. Also, the game is all about resource control. So if the safe bases that can't really be attacked, main, natural, whatever, are running out of resources faster, it's going to push both players' attention and influence and everything towards each other earlier in the game, which should hopefully result into additional conflicts in general and less passive play. If you try and play passive the way you might in Heart of the Swarm, then hopefully with a change like this, you will simply run out of money if your opponent's being very aggressive, controlling the map better, expanding out more quickly. He's able to use his resources, and when his bases are mining out, he's got new bases ready to saturate, ready to transfer those workers, whereas a player who's playing more passive can't necessarily do that. It puts more of a clock on certain builds. You can't just sit on 3 bases and max necessarily, because your main's going to be mining out so quickly. And so by the time you, this is all hypothetical, but let's say by the time you max on 3 bases and doing some Heart of the Swarm timing, your main is mined out, then all of a sudden it's way more all in. It's way more dangerous to do that. And so you're always hopefully more incentivized to be expanding and being aggressive on the map. I really like the idea behind this change. But again, a lot of this stuff on paper, just have to see how it's actually going to play out. Okay. And now we're going to roll into Terran, Protoss, and Zerg, but that's going to be starting with the next video. I'm just going to cut this into 2 pieces. So this is part 1, qxc's Legacy of the Void review. We're talking about new game modes, overall changes of the game, and what it means for Legacy of the Void. In the next part of the series, I'll be talking about all the unit changes for Terran, Protoss, and Zerg. Be sure to check that out. I'm coL.qxc. Thanks you guys for watching.